Committee annual report. And I want to thank our members of the Title I Advisory Committee. We have Beatrice Huffman, the coordinator of the Title I Committee, and Rosalind Rice Harris, manager of Title I. And we had Mike. Oh, there is. Oh, good. Okay. Yes. I know you need to get your materials. And we're very, very pleased to have Mike Waltz, who is a member at large of the Title I Parent Advisory Committee. And I know Mike very well. He's a former PTA president at Wayanoke Elementary School, and now is at Belvedere Elementary School. So we're very pleased to have all three of you here with us tonight. Who is going to lead off tonight? Mr. Waltz? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. First, I just want to talk about what the Title I Parent Advisory Committee does, what it is, and really by way of my introduction to it, I think will give you a good background. It was formerly called the DAC, the District Advisory Council, and the 2014-15 school year, the principal asked if I could be representative on it. And it was funny, I wasn't at the first meeting, and then I got an email saying, "Oh, you're on the executive board." I'm like, okay, great. Because Tanya Jones, who was in Title I office last year, knew me from Wayanoke, where my son was at. So she thought I'd be a good person for the board. And again, I wasn't there to deny it, so I became on it. And I really didn't know what it was yet. I didn't understand what the function and the purpose of the group was, and what committee is really charged to do is raise awareness and engagement of Title I families about the resources that are available and just ways that they can become more involved and enhance their students' experience. One thing that we actually changed after the first year was the name, because would anybody have any idea what District Advisory Council really means? Nobody had any idea. And as we want to more clearly articulate and identify ourselves for parents, we needed a name that's more active and embodies what we're trying to do. So Parent Advisory Committee, I think, is much stronger and much more clear, and it tells parents, oh, this is for us. So we changed the name, and what this group of us, I think most of us, if not all, have had a stint as a PTA president, just being on the ground, doing that parent advocacy work. I've really tried to take this forward to not just serve on a group, but really empower and engage and move things forward and help families to bring themselves up to a different a better circumstance for their kids' benefit. Now I'll go at a high level, and you can jump in if there's questions, but just kind of flesh out what our recommendations and proposed actions, the work we did over the course of the year. The first one was to develop and implement improved communication strategies to remove barriers to parent involvement. And proposed actions under that recommendation is to have a common mode of communication about coursework such as the FCPS 24/7 Blackboard, with different content as appropriate based on the age and the grade of the children. Have a parent survey that will solicit diverse parents' voices in telling what the barriers are to engagement in ways that we can mitigate and get around them. Because Title I is not just families of a certain socioeconomic level, but also a lot of language challenges. We also want to explore and expand ways that schools can reach and engage these parents to carry out these functions, make them we don't just drop them off. What can we do in the evening? What can we do in the day? What is there available for us to take part in, whether it's a weekend field trip, bus trip, or any type of, science or, special extracurricular or a educational event outside of the school day that they can take advantage of. And, another proposed action is encouraging the administrators to collaborate in this work with us to strengthen shared understanding and partnerships. And I think that's part of the reason to change the name was to, again, flag and highlight to parents that there is a group that's made for them. But with the administration, if they can, because the process right now is the principal will, reach out around the first month of the school year looking for somebody to serve on the board. But I think that a lot of the principals may not be totally clear on what the purpose of this committee is. So I think if there's a way maybe they could sit in and participate in some of the meetings, or just have a more involved role in it, I think they can better articulate and relay to parents in the school, when they're looking for not only the volunteer to serve on that board, but for the school at large to know what's taking place. I think everybody's full engagement with the process will increase. The second recommendation was to explore a revised methodology that accounts for school poverty level when determining appropriate clinical support staff allocations for parent outreach and support roles accounting to include parent liaisons. And there's been, all of us, at Title I schools, we recognize the importance of a parent liaison. We can be in the school whether we're on the PTA or not, and some families may say hi, but when they see the parent liaison, they run to them and hug them because they really become a part of the family. We had a family market night at our school, and I was like, how do you know everybody? Because they ran to them. And it's recognizing that there's a special relationship there. And as PTA president, one thing I did, I met with at Wayne, it was called the Student Services Support Team, where it was not only the parent liaison, but the social worker and the counselors. And to realize all the things they do behind the scenes and just the knowledge and relationship they have with the families, it's something that we realize that in Title I, it's a vital component that they all have to have. But rather than, necessarily us speak on what we've learned, we wanted to hear straight from the horse's mouth, so we had a meeting with the parent liaisons. Were invited to one of our committee meetings, and they got to speak to the myriad of things that they do for the schools, and not just, the basic, I'll take that back and say, I guess maybe one thing that came out of it is that there isn't a set of responsibilities, because the populations and the nationalities of the majority of the families at the schools, they don't follow a certain, set type. And there's some that have helped with, finding employment, ways to, get increased resources for just, daily living expenses, partnering with local churches and other businesses that have community partnerships. I have to say, personally, one thing that's happened with with the Wayne this past year is a church that had been a partner in terms of giving coats and school supplies. This past year for our book fair, they donated a book for every student in the school. And they supplied the majority of our volunteer force for the book fair. And that's above and beyond, but just to have a group of, county staff that creates and cultivates those relationships is something that we really needed to hear. So in terms of proposed actions that could come from the parent liaison role, it would be maybe a classification and a compensation review to include a defined contracted position, and a revised job description that prioritizes the responsibility to fulfill the basic needs of students and their families, like setting a baseline of what the liaison will do. And they may do many things outside of that, but just to make sure that there's certain things that every school is receiving. Also, as funding has always been an issue over the past few years, exploring expanding university internship programs and partnerships with government or business entities to help augment the clinical support staffing in not conventional ways, but they can get the practical and meaningful experience in helping schools, and the schools are benefited. Also, set an expectation for including the clinical staff and parent representatives in family engagement teams or committees as we move forward, to add these perspectives. When thinking about how we need to engage parents, we really need to talk to the people that are already engaged with parents. And finally, to explore effective school-based support structures to identify and address specific parent and family needs, such as a school level family support department. It may be a different name at a different school, but essentially some type of a cohort with a counselor, liaison, social worker, where hopefully they can work together and balance out, what the needs are of the school. Third recommendation is to pursue avenues to ensure all students in high poverty schools have technology access in and out of the school setting. Proposed actions include expanding partnerships with internet service providers to increase the availability of subsidized internet access and improve bandwidth. Identify a viable path to provide free home and community internet services in specific high poverty communities with adequate bandwidth, again, to ensure the full functionality of instructional technology resources outside of the school setting. Committing division funding to technology device implementation for all students in high poverty communities so that schools don't have to rely on donors or supplemental federal grant funds such as Title I to meet the minimal technology needs of the student population. And also to refine and improve the current home survey methodology used for assessing the home technology internet access to account for speakers of other languages and those who may be unable to participate in a traditional survey model, which practically, when you think about it, folks who have trouble using or getting access to technology aren't really able to tell people that. So we may not be getting an accurate picture of how many people really, have that deficiency. And personally, it's not something that we've encountered yet. Yes, our children have a certain level of resources, but they're in elementary school at best, so they haven't had their whole curriculum and their learning experience sent to them through, elevated levels of technology. So it's something that I think I would say on the board, a few of us have children who moved on to middle and high school, but it's something definitely as going forward, I think we'll start to experience with some of our, children's friends and classmates who may not have just, I think what we take for granted, a lot of them see as, beyond a luxury. The final recommendation was to design and implement a plan to increase access to FCPS summer enrichment programs for families in Title I communities. Proposed actions under that recommendation is to evaluate and refine the current process for determining locations for summer enrichment programs and designating bus routes to include considerations for access within high poverty communities. Excuse me. As we were considering our summer camp situations or summer options for our children, part of it is whether or not even poverty is an issue, logistically, how can you manage this? How close is this school to you? What are the hours? What are the times? And even for us, we have 2 cars in the family, we both work. It's still logistically a big climb just to go from where we're at to a school, maybe they're bused to another place, and then there's aftercare and all those things. So imagine a family that may have 1 vehicle or no vehicle trying to take advantage of a summer program for their children. Another recommendation is to reassess and refine scholarships and sliding scale fees for summer enrichment programs to lessen the financial burden for families living below or just above the poverty line. And that's another consideration when you think about the cost of some of these programs. Well, sure, it's high value that's being provided, but there's just a large number of families that just probably can't take advantage of it. Personally, we fell into a great opportunity where our rising 4th grader is in a STEM program in the District of Columbia. It's through the National Society of Black Engineers, where it's basically sponsored by organizations such as Lockheed Martin, the Coast Guard, where for 3 weeks, it's $50, and they feed them. And if you're a parent and somebody feeds your kid and you pay $50 for 3 weeks of camp, who wouldn't send them there? But, and I think using our personal experience, if there are ways in which maybe the county can find other groups that could offer those type of programs, because this campus in the District of Columbia, so I have to drive my son off, and the hours are from 8:30 to 3:30, and it's about 15, 20 minutes from my job, so I can logistically manage it. But if there was some type of partnership or some type of program in the county where families could have that type of access, where it, with respect to their schedules and their availability and their transportation challenges, I think that would really, push things, in a real meaningful way, as, STEM or STEAM has become a profession or professions that are lacking in terms of those who have the skills, jobs that are sitting out there that people can be taking. And if we can get our kids involved in them now, they will be so well prepared by the time they get out of high school. The final proposed action is exploring how FCPS might expand the range of summer enrichment courses to better differentiate for the needs and interests of underrepresented students and prepare them to succeed in advanced academic learning experiences. Kind of what I just said, I guess. And overall, what we are looking to do, besides better articulating what we're here for and what our purpose is to get parents from the place of participant to active, engaged leader. And I think that starts with not only making them more comfortable taking part of things in their school, but letting them know what the county as a whole, has to help them maybe encounter the confidence or the cultural norms that they come from, where they may not be used to having a voice as we do here. Beyond that, I guess it's getting more buy-in, I think, from the administrators. And not that I don't think it's that they have a negative viewpoint. I think it's just not as well informed. I myself was not clear on what it provided, but over the past few years, the work that we've done, we're really proud of where we're taking this and, giving something more tangible that we can actually tell somebody in a 15, 20-second explanation, what the purpose is, what we're trying to do.
Thank you so much. Suffman or Ms. Rice-Harris, would you like to add to the report at this time? And I'll take board members' questions.
I would simply add that I'm sure the board recognizes that many of the themes that Mr. Woltz highlighted that were represented from the advisory committee's recommendations this year and proposed actions align so strongly to the strategic plan that you have laid out. So our executive board in particular and our committee sees a strong connection to the priorities the board has outlined, and really wants to partner with the board as far as how we can advance the board's priorities within Title I schools, and particularly in the families that need that next step and leverage to become leaders in our communities.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to start with Ms. Corbett Sanders, and then Mrs. Strauss, and then Ms. Palchik.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your report, and I found myself nodding my head as I went through it. So it's obvious that you have put a lot of effort into it and have been very proactive in providing some excellent recommendations. I particularly am supportive of the recommendations on parent liaisons, because they are at the heart of many of our communities, and I am always impressed that our parent liaisons go above and beyond the call of duty, and so very appreciative of your recommendations there. I do have two questions for you, and they really are two questions and a suggestion. Questions are about access, and how do we ensure we have access for our kids, especially that are at Title I schools, and in particular access to summer programs for our middle school kids. And do we need to do something more for our middle school kids that are transitioning up to middle school from Title I schools, or even some of our Title I middle schools? And if so, did you do any review as to access via the connector buses to the location of the programs? Because one of my concerns is that we have some great programs, and especially the Young Scholars, I think, is a model program. Very excited about Young Scholars in middle school in particular. But if the kids can't get there, then it doesn't really help them. And my second question is similarly addressed to access, and that's on the technology side. And I was hoping that you could give us some recommendations on how we ensure technology access, especially for those students that frequently move apartments. One of the things that we see in Ms. Derenak Koufax in my neck of the woods is that as soon as you see a big sign up on one of our apartment complex saying, first month free or, dropped the cost, we see a migration of students moving from one area to another. And so that obviously you can have parents signing up for internet access at discounted rates, but if they're frequently moving, that is not something that I would expect they would do. If you have any feedback on that, I'd love to hear it.
You have anything? As I said, I'm not as well versed on the specific day-to-day technology challenges that a lot of students may be experiencing. I do know that there can be, large migrations of families out of certain apartments just based on, the cost. Because I know there's, from Wayne-Oak in particular, I remember hearing that, I think the principal said in one of our board meetings, like 20 students have left in a month's time, just because the rents have gotten too high. So I could imagine that a lot of families, they may have a smartphone, and for a lot of them, that could be their primary means of communication. I don't know if, it's not, definitely not. Now, the feasibility would be costly, but I would imagine, I remember from my son's first grade classroom, the computers were pretty outdated. I don't know if there's some type of, partnering with a major corporation where they could have, smart devices they can use at least while in school, having them each get their own. I mean, that would be extremely expensive, but if there's just something where, even if there was a time period where they could come use those devices. And again, I guess elementary school is not where it's, as great a need, but they are learning how to use them. They don't want to go to middle school for the first time and here's a computer. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. So if there's some way they could have just increased devices that the children could access. I mean, there's, some schools have parent centers where, I think Belvedere has one, a parent center where they can use the computer and, even learn, language. So the increase, I don't know, the schools that do or don't have those, but, the increase of parent centers, I think, could help at least getting, the families, the parents up to a certain level of competency and in turn, the students. Regarding the access to summer programs via the connector buses, I guess I had not even looked or thought about that. I think if with whatever the summer programs were, it was kind of laid out, transportation options. Because I think what was listed on the website is certain pickup and drop off points. But if, alternate options were there provided, that families could kind of plan out a particular route, I think that could be helpful. Now, I know that a lot of camps, and Young Scholars, I think in particular, it doesn't run the full day, I don't think. And I think that's the problem. Like, what do you do for half a day? It's all kind of based on what the family's resources and schedule flexibility is like. And something that came out of our conversation with the parent liaisons was that in terms of getting families to even show up at meetings or events and functions, a lot of them work jobs where they don't have that type of leverage, or any power, where if they miss any time, even if they're sick or if their child's sick, they can't miss that. They have to be at work anyway. So I think recognizing, and I don't really know how we deal with that challenge. You're besides maybe helping them to get a better job, but how do you tell somebody, I don't show up, I'm going to lose my job, but we need you at a PTA meeting? It's a no-brainer what they're going to choose when they have to choose. I do think, though, alternate transportation options that they can take advantage of would be helpful. not just for summer programs, but just in general events that we have. Like if somebody could get to, the school after hours, if the car's out, if they could take the bus. And one thing that the PTA, the incoming, I say they're very happily incoming because I was outgoing, is going to be looking at doing is going to apartment complexes where a large percentage of families have students attending school. So they don't have to worry about that practical challenge of how am I going to make it back out in the evening. So I don't know how we would present that in terms of a county-sponsored program, but I think at least if we can bring ourselves more to the families instead of the majority of the time looking for them to come to us, I think that would step up engagement in a real meaningful way.
Thank you, Mrs. Strauss.
Thank you very much for your report, and thank you for your leadership and your willingness to be active folks in this program. I wanted to start with the connector bus piece. All of my schools in the Herndon Pyramid are Title I schools, and we had a transportation issue. But I believe the parent liaisons, they were critical people going to the Board of Supervisors. We also all helped. But they were able to change the bus transportation to the connector buses to better serve communities that were not served, particularly for coats. So the Board of Supervisors, as we work together, they are very interested in making sure that public transportation serves all communities. And as you know, we are engaged in a project called One Fairfax, where we want to make sure that as much as possible, everybody has access to transportation, to your basic services. So if there's a Title I school, if the connector bus and the bus stops are not convenient, or you find that there is a particular community that is not served at all, go to your Board of Supervisors, and just as a parent, you could go and say, change a bus stop. It happens and it works. So that is one concern, one suggestion. Another, I don't know that the Title I Parent Advisory Committee is aware that the school board and the Board of Supervisors have an ongoing joint committee called SKIP, where we talk about the needs of children and families and how can the services of both the county and the schools collaborate in the best way possible. Certainly parent liaisons. I mean, all of our clinical staff, educational staff, everybody is there, but again, it is the emphasis that families need many kinds of help and services in addition to obviously classroom instruction. So I don't know if you all at least need to be aware of the SKIP committee, because that gives you an insight into the wraparound services and community projects that are community-wide, so that we're making the best use of that. Then the next question I have, and I guess it's for Dr. Garza and our own staff, at the middle and high school, many of our counseling departments do RAMP, and it is a program whereby it's middle and high school, where the counseling service meet with parents, meet with students, talk about what are we doing, what can we do better. And I don't think that occurs at the elementary level, and I don't know if it should or what, but I don't know. But I know that where there is RAMP, there is a better understanding of parent community, PTA, as to how we best leverage services. I don't know.
I do know that we have some national winning schools that have applied the RAMP methodology.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say there were some elementary schools, but it's
I
been
don't
so
know.
long since I looked at that. I'd have to
look
up our schools again. But it's a great model. It's one that we've been promoting, trying to expand into all of our schools.
Exactly. That would be one question that I have. Then the other one is that for when you're talking about summer programs, I agree, transportation, all of that is important. When you mentioned young scholars, I guess one of the questions would be, would it be better if that program were full day but shorter? Because I know that's a half a day program, and I know for parents who also need childcare and transportation, that if you offer a half a day program, that then becomes a problem. And I have no idea if that's possible.
I think we always think it's better to have a full day program. I think most parents like a full day program. I know not all do, but most do. I think the challenge with the summer program, if it were a full day program, it's just that you double the cost essentially.
Well, or if
for
you
the staffing,
shorten the number of days, if you did full day for whatever the program was going to be, if that would be a trade. I don't know. Suggestion.
I don't know. I think there's some, goal to kind of to touch students as many days as possible to try to shorten that span between the last day of school and the first day of school. So I think if we were to lengthen the day and shorten it, I don't know what the impact on that would be.
Well, then the other suggestion would be a partnership with RecPac. And I don't know how much you guys interface with RecPac, but that's, again, it's a county program. I would definitely recommend it, because if we are offering a half-day academic program, because RecPac is pretty, I think it's in all of our communities, but a partnership with RecPac in the summer, because that provides your extended hours and to put in our academic program, and then somehow work out partnership where the kids who are going to Young Scholars have a space in RecPac for the rest of the day. That would be another way to solve that. And my last recommendation is, Boys Club, Girls Club, which is a fabulous organization. We've lost it in Herndon, which we were not pleased. And it's, from their perspective, it's a fundraising issue, but that can be just a lovely resource. But it takes business partnerships and the ability for the business partnerships to raise enough money. So the Boys Club, Girls Club, what happened is that they pulled back their services in Fairfax County, continue to provide their services in DC, which is lovely, but we need them too. So I would recommend reaching out to them and saying, how can we bring these programs back? So anyway, some thoughts. Thank you very much.
Ms. Palchuk.
Yes, thank you so much. I think some of my thoughts fall a little bit where Ms. Strauss was going. I actually, this summer, with a friend of mine, we've started a summer enrichment program in an underserved community. And one of the neat things there is that it's an apartment complex where the owners have started their own community development organization, and they provide a lot of opportunities for the students. They bus them to summer programs, Sweet House. Having lived and worked in DC for many years, I know there were so many opportunities there. And so beyond what our schools are able to do, I would love for us to, if you have ideas, or to partner with us and the county more to say, okay, like area by area, where can we find the key partners? Especially when we talk about, location, or is it community buildings, churches, areas that might have the space? How can we help them build programs, together? I think we're definitely at that point in this county where we need that. I remember growing up, I couldn't afford summer programs, but we had a mom who found all the free or almost free stuff and would take us around. My mom didn't drive. So how do we create more of those partnerships? I think that would be great. And then the bus issue, beyond just talking to supervisors about bus routes, safe crossing. Route 50 is quite dangerous. So I have in my community people across the street is the library, but many of them won't go because crossing Route 50 Arlington Boulevard can be quite dangerous. Just recently there was, I think, a big accident. So that's another area as we work with the county more on safe crossing to school, but also to libraries, to parks, to community centers, I think would be a great area of partnerships. And also that, I think the Parent Liaison program is amazing, and many of us are advocating for finding ways to grow that and have it be more sustainable. So really with SCIPT and with our partnerships, anything we can do, I think we're here to hear from you. How do we better communicate with families? Do we need a better texting program? How do we really get across? And it might not be the same thing across the board. It might really vary. And I think that's where we need to be flexible and figure out what's most effective in one community or one part of one community versus another. But thank you so much. Really appreciate your report and your work on this. And we're here to support you any way we can.
Thank you.
I have Mr. Moon to be followed by Ms. Dernak Kofax.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Some of my colleagues have already touched upon parent liaisons, and a few weeks ago I had an opportunity to comment upon this, but I'll do the same and asking you what your take on my question that I'm gonna give to you is. Probably different schools do it different way with the different liaisons, but many of our parent liaisons amazing. they act as counselors, social workers, translators, curriculum specialists, and as you mentioned, job finders, housing finders, etc. You think those are the right roles parent liaison should play, or their role should be limited to bringing parents to the right resources, bringing them to a professional counselor, professional curriculum specialist, professional social worker?
I think that what makes them so special is that they know the needs better than we do. So while we talked about maybe a baseline set of responsibilities that every parent liaison, should do, there's so many other needs that don't fall within the margins. So I don't know, without their specific input, how effective it would be for us to necessarily say, because, from school to school, the needs can differ so much. And one thing we did talk about, and we were was really questioning because we don't know, the formula for not just the parent liaisons, but the counselors and social workers, it's population-based. We think that's what it was. But in certain schools, such as some of the public schools in McLean, as compared to other Title I schools, we wondered if population was necessarily the best way to decide how many they should have. Because at Wayne Oak, for example, I know that 538 last year, and we had a full-time social worker, 2 counselors, a parent liaison. This year, the enrollment, I think, dropped by maybe like 20 children, so we no longer would get a full-time social worker. But I think all would say that 20 less students, does not nullify the need for a full-time social worker. So I think we kind of just, spoke aloud and tried to figure out if there was a way that there could be more of those support service professionals to help schools that, maybe in, greater need than others, that just because they have more population may have more of them. Did I answer your question all the way, or?
I think we need to continue having
Okay.
this, dialogue.
Okay.
Maybe
Absolutely.
outside, tonight's meeting, since time is limited for tonight. But the next question goes on to, because in your presentation, you mentioned about parents who are English language learners. That, do you think by bringing some adult for the parent groups, that language classes to school sites might help bringing them into schools and also give them an opportunity to learn the language there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one thing that all of us, when we sit around these tables of parent committees or advocacy groups, the majority of us, English is our first language. A lot of us are from here. And I think we want these groups to be populated by more of the families that are representative of what our Title I schools look like. So I think having that resource in the school, I think, would be huge.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Derenak-Kovacs, to be followed by Ms. Hines, and then Mrs. Hoffman.
Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for your report. I represent the Lee District, as Ms. Corbett Sanders said, and 50% of my schools are Title I schools. So I really appreciate your work on this. One of my frustrations I've seen one of my frustrations and what I've seen with some of our principals and administrators is what you're talking about, the inability for some schools to generate that parent engagement. I do like your proposed actions of authorizing a survey to try to actually name the barriers and see what they are. I do find that some of my most successful Title I schools are those that have successful PTAs. And, since that's an avenue that's already established, have you, in your discussions on establishing parent interaction. Have you talked about maybe the partnering of one school with another and having, that successful PTA? Because sometimes it's just a matter of getting a handful of people, 1 to 3 people involved, and then they can bring everybody else in. But I think that's one thing that might be successful. That's not something we often do well. Sometimes here in Fairfax, we have a successful model at one end of my district, and it hasn't reached the other end of the district, and it's difficult to try to figure out how to do that. So I guess my question for you is, did the conversation ever go that way, and is that something that you might think would be successful?
I think it absolutely would. And I have to say that at the beginning of my PTA presidency, Ms. Evans invited myself and every other PTA president in our district to her house for a roundtable. And just the exchange of ideas and perspectives, I think, really helped us understand what each other is going through, but also we got great ideas for things we could bring to our schools. So if similar, groups like that could be set up, I think that would be really helpful, because all of us, figure out certain ways to do things, and in between meetings, we'll, decide, to tell somebody what happened at our school, which worked really well, whether we had a PTA meeting later at night or if they offered them different times for the, morning one time, afternoon, and evening, try to test that and see what works. I think the exchange of ideas is really the way that we can take it forward.
All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that we're excited in Title I that for this fiscal year 17, we're now organized under an Office of Professional Learning and Family Engagement. So we're side by side with the Office of Family and School Partnerships, who has a new coordinator, Dr. Renee Jackson, who is just leaving the National PTA to join Fairfax County Public Schools. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to be side by side with her expertise, as well as the expertise of the rest of the Family and School Partnerships team, to leverage some of the resources and ideas that have been successful as we continue to work with the advisory committee as well. So just a little plug for some additional partnerships within central office.
Wonderful. And I think Ms. Strauss jarred my memory about the SCIPT committee. This year I was one of the board representatives on the SCIPT. I'm not sure if I will be next year or not, because we're changing our committee responsibilities currently. But I do think whomever sits on this board, and there's usually 2 representatives we have, should partner, at least a reporting out function, or have some kind of synergy and partnership there. That's a natural one. The SCIPT one is a fairly broad, and within the last 2 to 3 years has become more active and engaged. But some type of representative from your group should definitely be talking and working together. So thank you again.
Thank you. I have Ms. Hines to be followed by Mrs. Huff.
Okay, thank you all very much. Most of what I've been thinking has been said, so I'll try not to repeat, other than to say I do think that one of the things I've heard from a lot of folks is that summer lag, right? And you really speak to it here. And a lot of the ideas that I've heard tonight, I think, are good ones. In my own experience with the schools in my district, I know, for example, there's one school that had Rec Pack last year that was very popular with the neighborhood. Most of the kids at the school can walk, and it's cheap, and they could afford it. And so now this summer, unfortunately, they have a different county summer program, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but they didn't get Rec Pack, they got something else. It's more expensive. So they have, a third fewer kids taking advantage of it. And the summer school opportunity is not at their school, it's at another school, so the parents would have to travel there when they could walk right to their school. So there's, and then the, young scholars, I completely agree. We've got to try to give people a full day, and we all know how important that is. And I guess that maybe comes down to that coordination, and because the folks on SCIPT are so concerned with summer loss, in my experience, that's something that's very important to them. I think coordinating with county programs and with local service providers and volunteer groups. I mean, I think of Cornerstones, the old Reston Interfaith provides a lot of extra support for families in Reston, and So anyway, I know that all that coordination takes work and time and people, but I think you've keyed in on the questions and the places where we need to be focused. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Hopp.
Thank you. I was assigned to the liaison of this committee as I became a new board member, and I appreciated the welcome when I came to the meeting, so thank you. And one of the things that I most greatly got out of being part of the conversation was something you'd written in your summary as well, that Title I schools have an obligation to inform, involve, and partner with parents. So I think we could probably say that for all of the schools, not just our Title I schools, but I understand that that's your focus, and appreciate that. I want to make sure that, you know, the challenge for Title I, as you guys are making me understand, is that we have an obligation to listen to all of our parents, but within the Title I community, we have a trouble reaching those parents. So I appreciate your recommendations. And one of the things I wanted to throw out, I know we've emailed about, but haven't talked about publicly, is something I'd seen at one of the school board association conferences about some of the practical ways that we can really do this. And some of my colleagues mentioned partnering with Boys and Girls Clubs and Fairfax County. And one of the ideas I had seen was one of the school systems put washers and dryers in their Title I schools. And that allowed the parents to do something practical. A practical need was being met. I know during the presentation you mentioned that parents, you know, they don't have time to skip work and go to a PTA meeting, but very well laundry has to get done, something very practical. But the other thing they mentioned that I loved was that the parents, while they were there, were being encouraged to volunteer and give back, which was a blessing to them, because that's something that they don't have an opportunity to do. And while they're there, they have an opportunity to learn how to be involved and learn to make sure that their voices are heard. So I hope that we can continue to look at some of those innovative ideas to reach those parents, and also to give back as a community. Maybe finding different churches being responsible for different schools. You've got that laundry detergent, you know, just those simple things. So thank you.
So I'll just take a quick turn and say I want to thank you very much for an excellent report. I've marked it up and put stars in different places. I do particularly, as some of my colleagues have said, want to make mention of the parent liaison issue, and very much appreciate your recommendation to have a full-time parent liaison in every Title I school. I completely support you in that. And we are, in fact, going to be getting a report on parent liaisons and other NIAs and other paraprofessionals in the fall. So I very much hope this is the year for that. We've talked about it in the past, but I certainly hope this is the year that we can do exactly what you're asking us to do and recommending that we do. Have the job classification, be thoughtful about what they need to do, and I know they do a lot. You know, they connect with parents in so many ways, which is why when a parent liaison calls and says, you know, this is important, you know, to a parent, that and the hugs. I loved the image, Mike, that you had of people running up and hugging the parent liaison, and I know that's critical. So thank you all very much for being here. With that, if I see no more comments or questions, we will take a 5-minute break until our next work session, so our technical folks can do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.